Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Rad Bill here. Sadly, Money Mike couldn't join us today. He's going cross country with our favorite charity, Hand Jobs for the Homeless. Today, it's just going to be you and I, and we're going to be covering Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Before we begin, I want to give special thanks to our anonymous research assistant. I'll call her Mystery. She was integral to the making and quick turnaround of this episode, and we don't know what we would do without her. Mystery, you are a frickin' legend. Anyways, I'm Rad Bill, and I'm Money. It was worth a try. And so, Robert Kiyosaki was born in the poor part of the Big Island in Hawaii in 1947 to two parents who migrated from Japan. His father was very well educated and worked as a professor, which didn't earn much. He was careful to emphasize to Robert the importance of getting an education and getting a steady job. A critical aspect to a comfortable life is stability. What would change the trajectory of Robert's life were his encounters with the father of a close friend who made a significant fortune and owned some of the best real estate in Waikiki. He, like Robert's father, believed in the power of a good education. But crucially, he believed more in the value of a financial education than an academic education, and had dropped out after the 8th grade. Robert recalls this man as Rich Dad in the retelling of his formative years. Robert's early life was, by all accounts, humble. He attended a public high school on the Big Island of Hawaii and studied at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, eventually graduating as a desk officer oriented in marine transportation in 1967. He worked his way up the ladder, becoming second lieutenant in the U.S. Naval Marine Corps, and served as a helicopter gunship pilot in the Vietnam War. After serving his country, Robert became a sales assistant at Xerox in New York City. In 1977, he would put what he learned from Rich Dad to work and start his first business, which apparently failed fairly quickly as a result of his product's poor quality. Like any great entrepreneur, though, Robert knew that the key to success was perseverance. He went on to start another company that sought to monetize T-shirts for metal bands of the era. When this venture failed as well, he shifted his focus to stocks and real estate. And as far as we can tell, this is where Robert's wealth goes from modest to stratospheric. He's pretty secretive about the investments that made him the man he is today, but cites that at a point he was overseeing more than 8,000 development projects and investment properties around the world. In 1997, Robert recounted the formative encounters with Rich Dad in his book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He recounted what he had learned from his father and his friend's father, Rich Dad. It's interesting exploring this story and noting some of the striking similarities between Rich Dad and Robert. Both men came from modest backgrounds and would eventually work their way to the top. Both men were firm believers in the American dream. And crucially, neither of these men had made any real money prior to the release of this fucking book. That's right. As far as we can tell, Rich Dad didn't make any of his own money. And there's no evidence of any Rich Dad type owning, quote, some of the best real estate in Waikiki, unquote. Furthermore, all of Robert's money came from the popularity of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. No one has been able to identify any investment assets held by Robert Kiyosaki before the publication of this book. Accruing wealth before the publication of this book wasn't a concern of Rich Dad because, according to our sources, no one can find any record of him existing at all.
What the fuck?
Despite towering odds, Robert's name would go on to appear on the cover of 30 books, dozens of motivational videos and speeches on becoming rich, seminars for investing in stocks and real estate, class action lawsuits, and in 2021, a Chapter 7 bankruptcy proceeding. Actually, according to our sources, there were 2 bankruptcy proceedings. In 2012, following a number of class action lawsuits accusing his company of only providing imaginary value in its pricey seminars, Kiyosaki's company went bankrupt. An excerpt from one of our sources. The creator and the companies behind the Rich Dad, Poor Dad empire have been hit with a class action lawsuit for allegedly using their free Rich Dad education courses and $199 seminars on how to achieve financial success as a high pressure sales scam to sell additional worthless courses for tens of thousands of dollars. Plaintiff Robert Crew alleges in the Rich Dad class action lawsuit that Rich Dad Education's sales scam is built on a misleading three-tiered sales pitch where customers are sold increasingly expensive financial training programs using pressure tactics and false promises concerning the program's ability to produce financial results for trainees. Crew says he paid $199 to attend a 3-day Rich Dad education program on stock success, which was supposed to provide training and education in trading stocks. Instead, he says, the entire workshop revolved around trying to upsell students into additional useless but more expensive coursework and monitoring, which, by the way, the most expensive classes could cost up to $64,000 per enrollee. Crew says he did not receive any training or education on trading stocks as promised. The second bankruptcy proceeding we were able to identify was that of Rich Global LLC. They filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy protection on August 20th, 2021, after losing a lawsuit filed by Learning Annex, Kiyosaki's old backer who assisted him in brokering his public events and conferences. According to the district judge's conclusion, Robert Kiyosaki's company owed Learning Annex $23.7 million in royalties after failing to pay the company a mutually agreed upon percentage of profits. In the bankruptcy document, it was stated Mr. Kiyosaki will not use any of his personal capital to cover the debts incurred. Some have raised criticism that filing for bankruptcy was just Robert's attempt to avoid or delay payment. During this same period, he was conducting business as usual through his other enterprises, including Rich Dad Co. Robert's career has been centered around selling the keys to wealth to his disciples. These keys come in the form of the books he wrote, some of which he co-authored with Donald Trump, a board game called Cash Flow, which retailed for $200, and seminars that educated his readership in the art of getting suckered in by ultra-high-pressure sales techniques. In Chapter 8 of Robert's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, there's an excerpt that reads, "There is gold everywhere. Most people are not trained to see it." We at Profiteers vs. the People would advise that our listeners identify the gold firsthand before following the advice of a shovel salesman. The only crutches we can verify is a great big letter C for consumer harm. Robert Kiyosaki is an asshole and a snake oil salesman and has built an empire on the backs of the people who chose to believe in his version of America. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks again to our wonderful mystery for all of their help on this project. And thank you, the listener, for tuning in. We love you all. We hope you have a great week. Thank you so much again for tuning in to this shorter episode, and thank you for your patience with us. After this episode, we are going to be adhering to a semi-weekly episode release schedule. See you on the next one.